We come towards the end of the book of Acts, Acts chapter 27. Another aspect of Christian living found in the early church. These are people who are not like full-time workers. It's actually about Paul, but it's him as a secular person trying to be a witness for Christ in the setting that God had placed him. So we'll turn to Acts chapter 27. It's a long passage, so I don't think I'm going to read the whole passage. We will just go, as we see the things, we will go on. So I won't be reading that passage. Well, this is a situation where Paul is a prisoner. And he has appealed to Caesar. And because of that, he has to be taken to Rome. And he's on his way to Rome when they get caught in a storm. That's sort of the background. He's in a very frustrating situation. He's a prisoner. A brilliant guy, great Christian leader, but a prisoner. So maybe sometimes you think you are a prisoner at home, having to bring up your children when you have so many other abilities, or in a job that you're not very happy with, and you are frustrated. But out of such situations also, God can call us to do things. So we are going to talk about witness in secular settings. Okay. Paul, as a prisoner, yeah, that's okay. I'm fine. Thanks. Paul has come. He has got into this boat, and they make a stop. They make a stop where they in Sidon, right? Before they get onto the main high seas. They stop in Sidon, and Paul is a prisoner, but the Roman officer, Junius, was this is verse 3 of chapter 27. The Roman officer, Junius, was very kind to Paul and let him go ashore to visit with friends. And this is very unusual for a prisoner to be given an opportunity to go and visit their friends. So my point is, you cultivate friendships. Paul, wherever he went, he seemed to cultivate friendships with people. Later, on another ship, the soldiers wanted to kill all the prisoners. But verse 42 of chapter 27 says that the commanding officer wanted to spare Paul. He had got to like Paul. And because of that, everybody's life, all the prisoners, were saved. Then, earlier on, when he was, later, they are rescued and they go to Malta. And in Malta, he is ministering to the family of the chief official of Malta. This is chapter 28, verses 7 and 8. Earlier, when he was a prisoner in Caesarea, the governor used to come and chat with him about the gospel and various things. Of course, he was hoping for a bribe, which he didn't get. But what you see is that a characteristic of those who thrived while they were in frustrating situations, minorities, one of the characteristics of those who thrived was friendship. Daniel is possibly the best example of this. Remember the time that the king had to send him to the den of lions He couldn't sleep the night because they had become friends. He had become friends with the king. And Jesus was a friend of the people who were shunned by the military establishment. You know, about 10 years ago, 9 years ago, there was a huge wave of attacks on Christians. A monk died, and they said the Christians poisoned him. And so the places were burnt and a lot of things. There were these attacks. And there was a wave of persecution. There was a poster outside my house on our wall that said, people who convert others for dollars should be sent out of the country, you know. And we later heard it was from the representative of the very strong political left-wing radical party that had done this. So we had to, and then we heard that they were going to, I was out of the country. They were thinking of burning my car, my vehicle. So we had to take the vehicle and keep it somewhere else. So I came back and I realized who had done this. He's a man from our village. I knew his father. So I thought I must make friends with this person, somehow make friends with this person. And I go for walks in my neighborhood so that I can chat to the neighbors. So I was walking, when I walk, I always smiled at him. And he always frowned back. That was the way it happened. Always smiled, always frowned. And then, to my great surprise, the community, it's like a slum village, the community was having a show, a concert for their children, to showcase their children's talents. And they asked me to come as the chief guest. So as the chief guest, I had to give a speech. And this man was there, this guy from the communist group was there. And one thing I said about how these children can grow up and become influential figures in the country or something I said. And he was impressed by what I said. And he clapped. And I realized, oh, we are making a little progress with this guy. And then his father died. So when his father died, I went to the house, to the funeral. And it so happened that I got a seat just next to this guy. And I chatted to him. I asked him about his family. And he was so warm. When I asked him about his family, he called his children and introduced each one to me and said, you know, this is so-and-so and things like that. And after that, we were friends. So I'd stop and talk politics with him, you know. But I realized that sometimes people's hostility over us is because they don't know who we are. One of my students in seminary, who was a pastor, once said, when a person becomes a Christian, he becomes a bad neighbor. So I got a bit of a shock. What do you mean by becomes a bad neighbor? Why? On Monday he goes to church, on Tuesday he goes to church, on Wednesday he's at church, he's at this prayer meeting, that prayer meeting. None of the neighbors know anything about them. Earlier they were members of the community. Now they are strangers. And so there are stories that are spread about them, about Christianity, and they believe because they have no contact with us. The best way to dispel wrong stories is to get friendly with the people who are spreading the stories. And this is something that Paul did. He made friends wherever he went. So I think we need to make friends with people. We need to make our churches premises where the neighbors can come and use in ways. It's very difficult. We've been pushing for this in our church, and now we are beginning to do it. But we pushed it for a long time. Because when neighbors come and use it, they damage some of the stuff. They, things are, bad things happen sometimes. But we need to make our churches places where the community knows these people are our friends. And Christians are people who are not as bad as we think they are. So, cultivate friendships. The next thing that we find Paul doing, now they are going by ship and they're about to set off. And verse 10 says, of chapter 27, verse 10 says, "Sirs, I perceive that the voyage will be with injury and much loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives." Paul had traveled a lot. And he knew this time of the year, the winds are going to be bad. It's best for you not to go. Contribute wisdom. And his advice was rejected. And the result was big trouble for the group. But after several days in a storm, they hadn't eaten for some time. So again, he took the lead. And he said, we are going to be rescued in a short while, so you've got to be strong. So take some food and eat. Please eat something. He tells them to eat. This is verse 33 to 38. 34 is the thing where he says, ask them to eat. And it'll give you strength for the final, this thing. So, good worldly wisdom, wise responses to difficult situations in life. These are things that we can do as Christians. Write to the newspapers, present papers on issues that the country is facing. Christians must be skilled in the art of double listening. You know what double listening is? You listen to the word, and you listen to the word, and you tell the world something from the word. You tell the world God's wisdom, because the wisdom of the Creator is great, or Creator of the world, is the best thing the world can hear. And so, life-giving wisdom, we have the opportunity of giving life-giving wisdom to people. So we need to know the word. John Wesley was once walking with one of his young preachers whose name was Sammy. And as they were walking on the road, two women were having a fight. And it was quite a vicious fight. And Sammy wanted to move away and go from there without any, getting involved in this. And John Wesley told Sammy, the young preacher, "Stay, Sammy, stay and learn to preach." As we observe and we put our knowledge of the Bible together, we put the two together and come with life-giving wisdom to our people. Today there's a lot of confusion. I don't know how it is in your country, but in our country, sex has become a huge problem. And love, marriage, parenting, family, these can result in sheer confusion today. And the Bible has what the world is looking for. It has the answer, and we are the ones who have to present it to the world in language that they can understand. We can't be using Christian jargon. Sometimes even using Christian jargon, God can use our words. I had an interesting situation. I was asked, there's a little booklet, it's on sale here, called Sensible Behavior. I was asked to speak to Christian leaders about men and women working together in ministry and some of the issues that they face and how to be sensible in our relationships with the opposite sex. So I was talking about sex and, various things like that to these Christian workers, under the impression that everybody there was a Christian worker. But there was one person who was taking profuse notes. The others weren't taking much notes, but this guy was taking a lot of profuse notes. And after the meeting, he came and saw me, talked to me. He said, "I'd like to meet you." So we made an appointment and we met. This was held in a church. The meeting was held in a church. Next to the church was a huge army camp. And this guy was the commander of the camp. High army official. This was during the war, And he was a devout Buddhist. And he was taking all these notes. So he told me, "Our people need to hear what you have to say. I want you to come to our village and talk to our young people." Then he called his wife and he said, "Talk to her," So I didn't know what to say. I said, I was very happy to meet your husband and talk to him and things like that. And I was shocked because I was speaking to Christian workers. But there was wisdom in the scriptures that was helpful, life-giving to these people. And then we had, you remember we had the terrible tsunami in 2006 or something. We had the tsunami. And there were all these refugee camps. And they were not allowing outside groups to go into the refugee camps. It so happened that the biggest refugee camp was under this commander. So our Youth for Christ workers went. And they said, "We are from Youth for Christ." Come. He remembered, what had happened. So I think Christians need to be seriously taking the challenge of giving life-giving wisdom to our nation. Writing to the papers, the best people are not pastors like us, but people who are lay people. Because they will be listened to better than us, because they expect us to say certain things. So we need to respond to issues and seek ways to impart the wisdom of the Creator to the nation. Okay, then we become agents of hope. Now, this was a desperate situation the group was in. I don't know whether you've ever gone in a boat when it was rocking. There were times during the war when I had to go to the north and I used to go by boat because the roads were closed. And once I was in the biggest boat I went in, actually. Normally I go in a small boat. But this time it was a bigger boat, but there were waves. No storm, but just waves. And that trip, I made a discovery that I hadn't known before. I made a discovery of how much my stomach holds, because everything came out. And it was an amazing amount of volume of food that was in my stomach. But I tell you, I thought, "Oh Lord, why don't I die? I can't go through this." It was such a painful thing. And it was not even a storm, just a few waves. These people were in a storm for 2 weeks. You can imagine the vomiting, the nausea. They had thrown their cargo overboard, and it was a terrible situation. But look at what he says in verse 22. "Take courage. None of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down." Verse 25. "Again, take courage, for I believe God," he says. Then verse 35. He gives thanks and he eats in the midst of the storm. That is, I haven't given up on life. He wanted to be a symbol of hope. I haven't given up on life. And he ate in the midst of the storm. And verse 36 says, they were all encouraged and ate some food. Things may look very bleak around us, but Christianity is a religion of hope. And we believe that there is there's another history at work. That's why I tell our people in Sri Lanka, don't give up. I'm told that our population is 22 million. I'm told that last year, 1.1 million people left the country. That's 5% of the population has left the country because it's in such dire straits. But I keep telling our people, God is at work. There's another history at work. Don't give up. Don't give up on Sri Lanka. God put you here. You have a job to do. God is going to do something special. The Bible says that every kingdom will present its riches in the final kingdom. And we have two main races in our country, two different races, Sinhalese and Tamil. And I tell our people, our Tamil people are going to give something to the kingdom in heaven. Their riches. Our Sinhalese people are going to give our riches. We have hope. We don't give up. Christianity is a religion of hope. During the war, when things were really, really bad, we told our people, we've got to make our centers places of hope. So every day people study, people play in the evenings, and then there is curfew in the night. So they come, stay in our center and study. So that, because their homes don't have electricity. So everybody had given up on life. So when people give up on life, we shall tell people there is hope. So we need to have present, as everybody has got sick and tired of the problems in the country, we Christians say, no, we don't give up. There is another history at work. There is hope. So we become agents of hope. Then we slip in appropriate testimony. Verse 23. For the last night, an angel of God, of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve, stood beside me. He was talking to them and he just slipped in. The God to whom I belong and whom I serve. And then verse 24. God has granted you all in the ship. He just says, God is with you. God is with us. Verse 25. Take heart, for I have faith in God. Later in verse 35, he prays, asking God to bless the food. In many of our engagements in society, we cannot explicitly proclaim the gospel. But there are other opportunities for that. Yet we can slip in these little thoughts that who we are and what we do, we owe to God. Daniel did this a lot. You remember when Nebuchadnezzar said, are you able? Can you tell me the dream and give its meaning? He replied, no human can, but there is a God. He used the opportunity to present his Christian principles. I was really thrilled when I saw, this was many years ago, you remember they had the Brazil Olympics, maybe 10 years ago, I don't remember. But there was this situation where a girl, a lady, the New Zealand girl fell. They tripped and fell. You remember that incident? They tripped and fell. And this was the 5,000-meter race. And one of the girls who fell, Abby Agostino, the other one was had a bad fall. This girl had a small fall. So their chances of winning the race was gone. But she stopped, got that girl to get up and told her, quick, we've got to finish this. Quick, get up. We have to finish this race. And the two limped together and finished the race. And this girl who picked up that lady became one of the heroes of the Brazil Olympics. Now I saw an interview with her on CNN. And they were asking, she was a hero, they were asking also, CNN is not very friendly towards Christianity. They were asking all sorts of questions from her. And they said, what did you do when you were running? She said, I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. Slipped in a testimony about Christ. So we need to always be looking for opportunities to slip in. Who we are, what we do, is because of Christ. Then, endure suffering with the people. For 14 days, they were without intervention from God in answer to Paul. Paul would have prayed, Lord, take the storm away, take the storm away. But verse 27 says that for 14 days, nothing happened. The Bible is clear that God answers prayer to deliver us from trouble. And He does so miraculously. But sometimes, He doesn't answer in the way that we expect Him to answer. Because He has called us to a ministry of incarnation. To minister to a suffering people, we too need to know what suffering is. And sometimes God calls us to suffer with people. You know, I made a count some time ago where we are told to follow Christ's example. And I found 29 places in the New Testament where we are told to follow Christ's example. And 21 of them had to do with suffering and servanthood. If you want to be like Jesus, learn to suffer, learn to be a servant. Very strange. You know, when we talk of Jesus as an example, rarely do we talk of servanthood, where we talk about servanthood, but rarely about suffering, following the example of Christ. But in companionship with fellow sufferers, we can communicate hope to them. You know, that's one of the things that we can do. I remember once I was traveling, and it was my 50th birthday. And I missed the flight, got cancelled. So I couldn't go home for my 50th birthday. I spent it in, I think it was either, Dubai, at the Dubai airport. And there were a group of us, we got very friendly, because all of us were angry, upset, and all of that. And there was one person who was a lapsed Christian. She had worked with Youth for Christ as a volunteer some time ago, and now has given up. Well, we were there together, we suffered, we struggled, we became friends. Later, she had come to Sri Lanka, and one of our staff met her, because she had come to do with something to do with drug rehab. And when she explained her experience in the Dubai airport, she had started crying. The suffering had done something. Suffering with a fellow Christian had done something to her. You know, there is a friendship, a bond that comes as we suffer together. My wife is a cancer survivor. Thank God she has been free now for 12 years. 2 years ago, we stopped all the medicine. But we had to go, we had an operation, and then 8 rounds of chemotherapy, and then 25 rounds of radiation. Every day we went to the government hospital and stayed in a shed until it was our turn. But 25 days we went, every 5 days a week we went for 5 weeks. And we met the same group of people every time. And we became friends. Fellow sufferers became friends. And in that experience, we can share something of the love of Christ. John Wesley was on a ship, either going to South America, to America, or coming. But on that ship, there were some Moravian Christians, simple European, German-speaking Christians who were on fire for the Lord. And John Wesley was really impressed by these people and realized these people have something that I don't have. Here he was going as a missionary. This was before his conversion experience, but he was going as a missionary. And they got caught in a storm. When they were in that storm, John Wesley was afraid that he's going to die. He was scared. The Moravians, on the other hand, were singing hymns to God. So John Wesley asked the leader, "Were you not afraid?" And the leader said, "I thank God, no." "Were not your women and children afraid?" He said, "No, our women and children are not afraid to die." That had a huge impact upon this person, upon John Wesley. And when he went back to England, he came across a Moravian preacher called Peter Bowler, and through that connection, he came to an experience of God that was born again, filled with the Spirit. We don't know what it is, but it was what propelled the mission that he was involved in. So we suffer with the people. Then number 6, we warn of impending danger. Verse 30 says that the sailors try to abandon the ship, and they lower the lifeboat as if they were going to put out anchor, you know. These sailors wanted to get away because they knew the ship is going to get messed up. So they thought they'll lower the lifeboat as if they were lowering the anchor. And Paul saw it. Paul realized these guys are up to no good. So he told in verse 31, "You will all die unless the sailors stay." They are the ones who know. And if they go, all will die. He warned the people of impending danger. This is another thing that we can do as Christians. We see something serious, dangerous happening, and we can warn the people, this is wrong. We can give wise reasons as to why this is a dangerous thing. Development without ecological responsibility. If we see this happening, we can warn the government that this development is not going to help the country, the nation. We can speak on behalf of the environment. If there is planned parenthood at the cost of the life of the embryo, when there is abortion taking place, we can warn of what a terrible thing abortion is. If the just needs of oppressed people are being neglected, we warn, this is wrong. These people are being treated in a bad way. We warn the world, this is wrong. And when people are missing the greatest right that humans can have, which is the right of a relationship with God, we warn and tell them, this is dangerous, you've got to turn to God. So, we warn of impending danger. Can you see how we can be involved in society as Christians? We cultivate friendship, contribute wisdom, communicate hope, endure suffering, slip in testimony, and warn of danger. Our 7th point. Well, they have arrived at the island of Malta. You know, the shipwrecked but they were all able to come to the island of Malta. It's cold and rainy. Therefore, they built a fire. And chapter 28 and verse 3, Paul gathered an armful of sticks and was laying them on the fire when a poisonous snake bit him. Okay, he joined in the community as they were working. Of course, he was bitten by a snake, but God healed him from that. But he joined the community in its secular work. They needed heat. So he joined in it. William Barclay, commenting on this, says, only a little man refuses the little task. In the story of Nehemiah, even the big shots joined in the building of the wall. They were there with the people. And this is something that we can all do as Christians. Get involved when there is a community project for the welfare of the project. Even though we are an oppressed minority, we are princes and princesses of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. That is our identity. And people with such an identity have the courage to be servants. People who don't have an identity don't like to be servants. They get angry about being servants because it buttresses their feeling of inferiority. But we are children of God. Jesus said, knowing that John 13, verses 3 and 4, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, that he had come from God and was going to God, going back to God, okay? Jesus knew who he was, that he had come from God. God had given everything to him. Having known that, he said, he rose from supper, laid aside his outer garment, and washed the feet of the disciples. So we know who we are. And because we know who we are, we have strength to be servants. So let's be servants in our communities. Let's be servants in our offices. People will exploit, but it will be a witness for Christ, even as we do that. So, we adopt a servant, we adopt a servant lifestyle. There was during the tsunami, Christians were heavily involved in relief work. And sometimes relief workers can be very harsh and very rude to the people who benefit, to the beneficiaries. And this happened a lot during the tsunami. People would be, would be ashamed to come and ask for help. Because we were a youth movement, all our projects were in schools to help children to go back to school. So we gave packs of clothes, of books, of things like that, things for teachers, all school related. So we go to a school and we get all their measurements and everything, and we provide the food, the stuff that they need. One school we went to, one of the boys wasn't there, and he didn't get his pack. So we were in a church. Our team stayed in an Anglican church, and this boy's mother came to the church and nervously asked, I wasn't there, my child wasn't there, can you please give us a pack? So our volunteers and staff said, oh, come, auntie, come and sit, have a cup of tea. And so they had a cup of tea, and then she said, have you had lunch? No. Come and eat with us. We are going to have lunch now. And, she was expecting to get scolded for not being there. And here she was being given tea and then lunch. She went back to the community and told the people in the community, look at the way these Christians treated me. Today her son is a fine Christian, serving God in his church, active in the work of God. So we are called to be servants. But you can't be a servant unless you know your exalted identity in Christ. Okay, and then pray for personal needs. Number 8. The leader of the community in Malta, his father was ill, and Paul went and prayed for him and laid hands on him and healed him. You know, I have never had a situation where people have refused an offer of prayer. When our neighbors get sick, we go and pray. And they have never refused us. So we can always look for opportunities to pray for people. And that's what Paul did. And of course, there was healing that came as a result. My last point is what happened after they arrived in mainland Europe. They received encouragement from fellow Christians. When they arrived in the mainland, they realized there are some Christians, and they got encouragement from them. I'm not going to spend time on that, but that's very important. If you're going to be a Christian in a secular setting, you need to have Christians who support you, who encourage you. Those who have done great things, people like William Wilberforce, the great emancipator of slaves in the British Empire. He had a group called the Clapham Sect, a group of Christians who prayed for him, supported him, helped him, advised him, prepared his speeches, did research for him. We need Christians who will help us to do that. So, here are 9 things that we can do as secular in the secular world, which are not called typical ministry. Cultivate friendship, contribute wisdom, communicate hope, endure suffering with the people, slip in appropriate testimony, warn of impending danger, adopt a servant lifestyle, pray for personal needs, and receive encouragement from fellow Christians. May God help us to be like that in this country.